Okay, so after a journey that's taken nearly 20 years, India and the European Union have finally sealed a landmark trade agreement. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what this massive deal means for two of the world's biggest economic players.
Right off the bat, you hear people calling this the mother of all trade deals. And honestly, that's not just hype. The sheer scale and the incredible depth of this thing make it one of the most comprehensive agreements India has ever signed, period. And here's why that scale is so mind-boggling. You take the 27 EU nations, you add India, and what do you get? You get 2 billion people and a staggering 25% of the entire global GDP. We're not just talking about a trade deal, we're talking about the economic integration of a quarter of the world's economy. But man, getting here was not easy. This has been a marathon, not a sprint. The first talks kicked off way back in 2007, but they just hit a brick wall in 2013 over some really tough disagreements. It took almost a decade, a global pandemic, and some major shifts in geopolitics to get both sides back to the table in 2022, leading to the deal we have today. So, what is it that really makes this the mother of all deals? Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Look, this thing goes way beyond just cutting taxes on stuff we buy and sell. It is incredibly comprehensive. We're talking about services, IT, engineering. We're talking about protecting investments, intellectual property rights for things like medicines, and even big clauses on sustainability and climate change. It's about weaving the two economies together on so many different levels. Now, any trade deal, and I mean any trade deal, is a game of give and take. You can't expect to get something if you're not willing to give something up. So the big question is, what did India put on the table to make this whole thing happen? Okay, one of the biggest, longest-standing demands from the EU was getting better access to India's alcohol market. I mean, before this deal, the tariffs were a whopping 150% on wine and spirits. Now for wine, those tariffs are dropping all the way down to between 20 and 30%. That is a massive concession and a huge win for European winemakers. And then there are the cars. For years, if you wanted to import a European car into India, you were looking at duties up to 110%, which is why brands like BMW or Audi were so expensive. Under this new deal, that tariff is going to be phased down to just 10% over the next 5 to 10 years. A huge drop. But here's the clever part. India didn't just open the floodgates. These concessions were managed really carefully, with some crucial safety nets. For cars, for instance, there's a quota. It limits how many can be imported at that lower tariff. And the focus is really on the high-end luxury cars, which protects India's own mass-market manufacturers. Phasing these cuts in slowly, especially for EVs, also gives local industries that critical time they need to adapt. But hey, this was not a one-way street. Not at all. India managed to secure some absolutely massive victories in these negotiations. 0%. Let that number sink in for a second. This is, without a doubt, the single biggest win for India. Tariffs on the vast majority of Indian textiles, leather goods, and shoes going into the EU market, they're going to drop from as high as 12% all the way down to 0. And the real-world impact of that? It's immense. Hitting 0 tariffs gives a huge boost to India's small and medium-sized businesses, the real backbone of these sectors. It finally lets them compete head-to-head with countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam. And it's expected to create a ton of jobs, especially for women. It's a game changer. Now, here's another win that's just incredible, this time in the services sector. The EU has agreed to something called uncapped mobility. What does that mean? It means no quotas, no limits on the number of Indian students, professionals, or workers who want to go to Europe for study or work. In a world where visa rules are getting tighter everywhere, this is a truly remarkable strategic victory for India. So let's pull back from all the specific clauses for a minute. What's the bigger picture here? What's the long-term strategic vision behind a deal like this for India? Well, a key goal is just not putting all your eggs in one basket. It's market diversification. Now, India has a healthy trade surplus with both the US and the EU, but this deal is all about reducing over-reliance on any single partner. Strengthening ties with the entire 27-nation EU bloc is a massive step towards making India a more central hub in global trade. And the ambition here is huge. The official projection? With lower costs and Indian exports being more competitive, the total trade between India and the EU is expected to double by the year 2032. Think about that, doubling trade in less than a decade. Of course, a deal of this size is never without its challenges.
It's super important to have a clear-eyed view of the road that lies ahead.
There are some very real fears within some of India's domestic industries, like auto parts and dairy, about having to face these European giants head on. On top of that, India is going to face a lot of pressure to meet the EU's really strict environmental and labor standards. And finally, just making all of this happen will require big reforms in customs and infrastructure to make sure the benefits actually materialize.
So, the India-EU agreement is, without a doubt, a landmark achievement with just incredible potential. But you could say signing the deal was the easy part. The real work starts now. The ultimate question really is, can India navigate all these domestic challenges and push through the deep reforms needed to turn this historic handshake into a true economic game changer?